I have a very important question for everyone. If you reflect back over your childhood, who would you say is one of the most influential and loving people in your childhood? I'll ask that question once again. Reflect back over your childhood and think of one of the most influential and loving people in your childhood. For me, I would have to say that one of those people happened to be my father, which is Joe Lewis Banks Sr., that's sitting in the audience this very afternoon. My father was born in Wrightsville, Georgia. Now, to us Bulldog fans, that's Herschel Walker country, okay? You have to be careful about some of us Bulldog fans. We have a tendency to bite first and ask questions later. My dad, one of the painful experiences he went through in his childhood as a teenager, he witnessed his father die of cancer. And consequently, by being the only boy, he had to quit school. He couldn't read too well, and he had to start to work to help take care of the family financially. A couple years after he quit school, he started his career in brick masonry. And I'm glad to say that he's now on his 60th year in laying bricks. That's something to be proud of or to think of. Now, one thing about my father also, he was born in the same year in which this Miller Theater actually opened, which is in 1940. Ironically, when he came to Augusta in 1956, he was 16 years old. But my father could not walk through those very doors because he was African American. But today, his baby boy is standing on this very stage doing a TEDx talk on a global platform. Yeah. Booker T. Washington made a statement. He said that success is not determined by what you accomplish in life, but rather so it has to do with the obstacles you had to overcome to get there. You now have somewhat of an insight of the obstacles my father had to overcome. But what you don't see yet is the impact he made on my life and the lives of other kids in the community and how it affected my relationship with my father, with my son as well. And growing up in any relationship, honesty is one of the main pillars of a good relationship. My dad always taught me that your word is your bond. That's pretty much it. If my dad ever promised me he was going to take me to the mall on Saturday, when Saturday came, guess where I found myself? At the mall. If he said when he get off in the evening, he's going to take me down to this department store to get me this brand new slingshot I've been looking at for several weeks, when he got off work, no matter how tired he was, he would take me up to the store, and I saw myself receiving that new slingshot. Now, on the flip side of that, if he told me he was going to get me for something I didn't have any business doing, he kept his word as well, okay? Now, down here in the South, they have a neat little name for these meetings or reprimands when a parent has gotten fed up. They call them come to Jesus meeting, if you know what I'm talking about. Now, I'm 47 years old, and I still reflect back to those meetings, and I always thought that's an odd name for a meeting, because from the time my father took his belt off and until he put it back on, I can recall Jesus nowhere in that room, okay? Now, whether he shared his time with me or his resources or his reprimands, I knew he did it because he was concerned about my well-being. And the amazing thing about him, that he was not only concerned about the well-being of me, but also other young men in the community. You see, you remember I said my father's been laying bricks for over 60 years? On Saturdays, he would work for himself, and he would take me, my two oldest brothers, and at least 7 other nephews with him on Saturdays. Little did he know at that time that by him sowing into our lives, that years later, he would reap a financial advisor, 2 lawyers, a real estate developer, A number served in the nation's military, at the nation's capital, and also at the White House. That's remarkable. Very remarkable. Now, due to the type of work I do, I can't take kids with me to my office. But what I have done over a number of years, I've mentored or volunteered at a number of organizations. One of those organizations happened to be with the Fort Stewart or Youth Challenge Academy. What we do, we help young men who are maybe at risk, maybe got in trouble, dropped out of high school, so we kind of gather them back together to get them focused on what they need to be doing as well. The second organization that I've mentored or volunteered was 100 Black Men of Augusta. What we do, we take young boys as young as 8 years of age who don't have a father in their life for whatever reason, and we mentor them. Hopefully they'll finish high school, go on to vocational school, and also hopefully go to college. Currently, I volunteer at the First Tee of Augusta, which is a golfing program which was co-founded by the Augusta National to teach kids life skills through the game of golf. And currently, I'm in the process of become a volunteer through the My Brother's Keeper initiative, which was enacted, brought into existence by former President Obama, but has been accepted by the city ordinance through Mayor Hardy Davis, that we help kids to make certain that they're on reading level by the 3rd grade, which is very crucial. Whether I'm speaking of fathering or mentoring, there are some alarming statistics that I need to share with you. The vast majority of teenagers who drop out of high school, who run away from home, who engage in substance abuse, who enter juvenile detention centers, and who commit suicide come from fatherless homes. Sometimes when I hear those statistics, I'm a little guilty simply because I could have very easily been one of those teenagers. And one of the reasons why I'm able to stand before you today, and I'm grateful for saying this, that if it was not for the influence and love of my father, I could have easily ended up in that category. But I'm proud to say that due to his guidance, I never dropped out of high school. I never ran away from home. I never used or sold drugs in my life. I've never been high. I've never been drunk. And I've never, ever been in trouble with the law. And I don't even casually drink now. Now, a lot of these statistics can be diminished by proactive fathering. But not only that, it could be grossly worse if it was not for the proactive mothers, grandparents, and teachers and neighbors as well. There's an old African proverb that says, it takes a village to raise a child. Due to my upbringing, I had a wonderful experience as far as the village community that I was raised in. Also, at the center of this village, one of my aunts who's here today, Aunt Chris, she's in the audience. She was one of those people also who helped me to stay on track with a lot of things. She instilled in me the love of reading, and I love to read to this very day. But at the core of that village was my parents, my father and my mother. And they worked as a team raising us 4 kids. And the interesting thing is about far as being parent is that there's no book on parenting. And it's constantly changing and it's constantly evolving as well. And the interesting thing is that my father worked the first shift, my mother worked the 3rd shift. So when we got home from school, my mother was always there. She helped us with our homework, helped to get our clothes ready, iron our clothes, give us a hot meal, and take care of everything that needed to be taken care of until she had to go to work or till my father came home. So consequently, at night, before I would go to bed, the last face I would see at night would be my father. The first face I would see in the morning would be my father. He would get all 4 kids up in the morning and get them dressed. The person who was responsible for providing us with a hot meal in the morning was my father. And the person who saw us off to school every morning was my father. And then he would go to work. It wasn't apparent to me then, but when I became a father, I saw myself not creating new behaviors, but imitating what I was exposed to as a child. My son Joshua, who's 11 years old, if you ask him normally who's the last face he see at night before he go to bed, who do you think he'll say? His father. If you ask him normally who is the first face he'll see in the morning, he would say his father. Who would get him up and get him dressed? His father. Who would ensure he had a hot breakfast before he go off to school? His father. And who would he say would pray with him before he go off to school? He would say his father. Now, speaking of my son Joshua, now that smile says everything. If you look at that smile, that'll tell you there's never a dull moment in our house whatsoever. This is me and Joshua. This is my golfing buddy as well. This is where we were at the first tee of Augusta. We took some pictures. And our thing is that every Father's Day, we always do a round of golf somewhere. If we don't play much during the year, on Father's Day, we always make certain that we play golf. One thing I always share with my son, that one of the reasons why I named him Joshua, and for him to understand also one of the meanings of the name Joshua, is that a certain standard has to be set. And you got to keep pushing that bar higher and higher. And I tell him that that standard had been set by your grandfather. At this moment in my life, I'm striving to keep that standard and take it to the next level. And as you become more mature, it's going to be impressed upon you for you to meet that standard and take it a little bit further as well. Now that we've come full circle, you remember I asked you earlier when you reflect back over your childhood, who was maybe one of those people who was very influential and loving in your life as well? I will almost guarantee that that person set a standard in your life as well and making you who the person you are. And I think it's very imperative to us, if we have been so fortunate to have a person like that in our lives, then we should take that opportunity to pour it into some other child's life as well. And based upon us doing that, then we will have more testimonials, not just there's no love like a father's love, but there'll be testimonials that say there's no love like a mother's love, like a grandparent's love, like a teacher's love, or a neighbor's love. Because at the end of the day, if each one of us are honest with ourselves, the greatest desire that each one of us have in our life, where we're young and old, is to be loved. Thank you.